Think you know everything about AE's hit reality series, Storage Wars? Think again. Behind the seemingly straightforward premise of bidding on abandoned storage lockers lies a world of shocking scandals, dark discoveries, and jaw-dropping controversies that would make even the most seasoned reality TV viewers' heads spin. From actual dead bodies found in units to cast members' criminal pasts involving prison time, lawsuits over catchphrases, and physical brawls that required tetanus shots, the real drama happened when the cameras stopped rolling. Fact 1. Jarrod Schulz found a murder victim's corpse. Most people who watch Storage Wars expect to see antiques, old furniture, or maybe some valuable collectibles when the cast opens up an abandoned storage unit. What they definitely don't expect is a horrifying discovery that would make even the most seasoned treasure hunter want to walk away forever. But that's exactly what happened to Jarrod Schulz, long before he became known as the Gambler on television screens across America. Back in 1988, more than 20 years before Storage Wars even premiered, Jarrod was already working the storage auction circuit in San Diego, California. He had been buying abandoned units for years, hoping to find items he could resell for a profit at swap meets and through his various business ventures. On what seemed like any other auction day, Jarrod successfully bid on a storage locker that appeared to contain the usual mix of household items and personal belongings. When he began sorting through his purchase, however, Jarrod discovered something that would haunt him for years to come. Wrapped in plastic and hidden among the other contents was a human corpse. The discovery was so shocking that Jarrod immediately contacted the San Diego Police Department, who quickly took control of the entire scene. During their investigation, police officers confiscated everything in the storage locker as potential evidence. After conducting their own inquiry into the grisly find, law enforcement officials revealed the disturbing truth behind what Jarrod had stumbled upon. The body belonged to a woman who had been murdered by her husband, and the killer had used the storage unit as a makeshift hiding place for his victim. Years later, during a special episode of Storage Wars titled Unlocked, Jarrod briefly mentioned this traumatic experience while sitting around a poker table with his fellow cast members. When asked about some of the stranger things he had discovered over his decades in the business, Jarrod admitted that finding human remains was unfortunately not entirely uncommon in his line of work, saying he had also come across ashes and coffins during his career as a storage auction buyer. Fact 2. Dave Hester sued a rapper over you. When Dave Hester started shouting his signature catchphrase, "Why you up?" on Storage Wars, he probably never imagined it would lead to one of the most ridiculous legal battles in reality television history. But in 2011, that's exactly what happened when the controversial storage auction buyer found himself in a trademark dispute with Grammy-nominated rapper Trey Songz over who had the right to use and profit from the simple exclamation. The whole bizarre situation started when Dave Hester decided he wanted to cash in on his newfound fame by selling merchandise featuring his trademark yell. Hester had been using "Why you up?" as his bidding call during storage auctions for years, long before Storage Wars made him a household name. The catchphrase originally came from his background as a bid catcher at auction houses, where he needed to be loud and distinctive enough for auctioneers to hear him in crowded rooms. However, when Hester began the process of trademarking the phrase so he could sell t-shirts, hats, and other branded items, he ran into an unexpected problem. Trey Songz, whose real name is Tremaine Neverson, had been using a similar-sounding "Why you" in his music since 2009. And the rapper wasn't happy about someone else trying to claim ownership of what he considered his signature ad-lib. The legal battle became even more absurd when Trey Songz sent a cease and desist letter to Hester, demanding that he stop using "Why you up" on the show and halt any plans for merchandise sales. The rapper argued that he had been using the phrase in his songs for years, before Storage Wars even premiered, giving him prior claim to the expression. Both AE and Trey Songz eventually settled privately with Hester, though the specific terms of these agreements were never made public. Despite the legal drama, Hester's trademark application apparently continued to move forward, and he was able to produce "Why you" merchandise throughout his time on Storage Wars. The whole situation perfectly captured the sometimes petty nature of trademark law and showed just how far reality television personalities were willing to go to monetize their 15 minutes of fame. Fact 3. The show pays cast members rental fees for planted items. One of the most damaging revelations about Storage Wars came not from behind-the-scenes gossip, but from actual paperwork that proved the show was far from the authentic reality television experience it claimed to be. According to leaked documents that surfaced during various legal disputes, AE Television Network has been paying cast members what they call rental fees to use their own valuable items as planted discoveries in storage lockers. The scheme worked in a surprisingly straightforward way that completely undermined the show's premise. Cast members would provide their own antiques, collectibles, or other valuable items to the production company, which would then place these objects in storage units before filming began. When the cameras rolled and the cast members discovered these items during their locker excavations, viewers were led to believe they were witnessing genuine finds from abandoned storage units. The leaked paperwork revealed the business-like nature of this deception, showing invoices, checks, and other documentation where the production company actually compensated cast members for supplying items that were later found on camera. These transactions were treated as legitimate business expenses, with cast members essentially renting their personal belongings to the show for specific episodes. According to sources familiar with the production process, this practice was most commonly used during Storage Wars' early seasons, when the show was still establishing itself and needed guaranteed interesting content to keep viewers engaged. The rental fee system allowed producers to ensure that every episode would feature exciting discoveries, rather than risk filming sessions where cast members might find nothing but worthless junk. Anonymous industry insiders have also revealed that some items featured on the show were purchased specifically for planting by people whose job was to acquire antiques and collectibles for Storage Wars producers. These professional buyers would even have items appraised several weeks before they appeared on television, ensuring that the expert evaluations shown on screen would provide dramatic moments when cast members learned about their supposedly unexpected windfalls. The documentation of these rental fees created a clear paper trail that contradicted AE's repeated public statements that the show featured no staging and that all discoveries were genuine finds from legitimately abandoned storage lockers. Fact 4. 50% of all dialogue is scripted by writers. One of the most shocking admissions about Storage Wars came directly from someone who should know the truth better than anyone else involved with the production. Tom Beers, who served as both the executive producer and narrator of the show, revealed in interviews that approximately 50% of all the dialogue viewers hear on Storage Wars is actually written by professional screenwriters and then delivered by the cast members as if it were their own spontaneous dies. Conversation. This revelation completely contradicts the fundamental premise of reality television, which is supposed to capture real people having genuine interactions in unscripted situations. Instead of allowing the natural drama and personality conflicts to unfold organically during storage auctions, the show's producers decided to manufacture conversations that would create more entertaining television and ensure that every episode had the right mix of conflict, humor, and dramatic tension. The scripting process works by having writers create dialogue that fits the personalities and speaking styles of each cast member, then providing these lines to the actors before filming begins. This means that many of the witty one-liners, heated arguments, and memorable exchanges that fans remember from the show were actually crafted in a writer's room, rather than emerging naturally from the competitive atmosphere of storage auctions. Beer's admission helps explain why certain cast members always seem to have the perfect comeback. The scripted dialogue allowed producers to control the narrative flow of each episode and ensure that storylines developed in ways that would keep viewers engaged throughout the entire 30-minute runtime. This practice also meant that the cast members were essentially performing as actors rather than simply being themselves, which raises questions about how much of their on-screen personalities actually reflected their real-life behavior. The revelation that half of all conversations were pre-written suggests that Storage Wars was operating more like a scripted drama series than the documentary-style reality show it claimed to be, making the reality label somewhat misleading for audiences who believed they were watching authentic interactions between real storage auction buyers. Fact 5. Mark Balelo committed suicide after drug arrest. The Storage Wars cast suffered a devastating tragedy in February of 2013 when Mark Balelo, one of the show's most memorable recurring buyers, took his own life just days after being arrested on drug-related charges. Balelo, who was known to fans by his nickname Rico Suave because of his flashy clothing and the large amounts of cash he carried in his designer man purse, was found dead in his car at his auction house in Simi Valley, California. The 40-year-old businessman had appeared in multiple episodes across Storage Wars' second, third, and fourth seasons, where he quickly became known for his confident bidding style and willingness to bring as much as $50,000 in cash to storage auctions. His flamboyant personality and expensive wardrobe made him stand out among the regular cast members, and viewers were drawn to his over-the-top approach to the storage auction business. The tragic events began on a Saturday, when Balelo was arrested on suspicion of possessing methamphetamine and being under the influence of controlled substances. After being released from custody, sources close to Balelo reported that he was extremely distressed about the arrest and its potential impact on his business reputation and his future with Storage Wars. He had previously faced drug-related legal troubles in 2009, which may have added to his concerns about the consequences of this new arrest. On the Sunday following his release, Balelo met with his fiancée at his office, where they talked for several hours before he took a 4-hour nap. When he woke up, those around him said he seemed to be feeling better, and his fiancée left him at the office that evening, believing the crisis had passed. However, on Monday morning, one of Balelo's employees discovered his body inside a running car parked in the garage of his auction house. The Ventura County medical examiner later confirmed that Balelo had died from carbon monoxide poisoning and ruled his death a suicide. AE released a statement, expressing their sadness over the tragedy and offering condolences to Balelo's family during this difficult time. Fact 6. Jarrod Schulz served 16 months in state prison. While Storage Wars fans got to know Jarrod Schulz as one half of the Young Guns duo alongside his longtime partner Brandy Passante, the show never mentioned that he had spent significant time behind bars before his reality television career began. According to public court records and government documents, Jarrod served 16 months in California State Prison for felony drug possession and trafficking charges during the late 1990s, a dark chapter of his life that remained hidden throughout his more than 250-episode run on the series. The legal troubles began in January of 1997, when Jarrod was arrested for felony possession of a controlled substance, specifically methamphetamine. At the time, he was only around 20 years old and initially received what seemed like a lenient sentence of 60 days after pleading guilty to the charges. However, his problems with the law were far from over, as he was released early on probation and almost immediately found himself in trouble again. Just weeks after his first release, Jarrod was arrested once more, this time for transporting narcotics while driving under the influence of alcohol. The combination of violating his probation and committing new drug-related offenses while still under court supervision did not sit well with the judge handling his case. This second arrest resulted in a much harsher sentence of 16 months in California State Prison, where Jarrod found himself surrounded by violent offenders, including murderers and rapists. According to sources who spoke about Jarrod's incarceration, the experience of being locked up with such dangerous criminals served as a major wake-up call for the future reality television star. One unnamed source explained that living alongside these violent offenders made Jarrod realize he was heading down the same destructive path and needed to completely change his life direction. The source noted that while Jarrod was not inherently a bad person, he had gone through some very dark years where drugs were at the root of all his problems, and the prison experience ultimately motivated him to turn his life around permanently. Fact 7. A physical brawl required. Tetanus shots. On a Friday afternoon in June of 2015, what started as a routine Storage Wars filming session in Palm Springs, California, escalated into one of the most violent incidents in reality television history, when cast member Dave Hester got into a physical altercation with auctioneers Dan and Laura Dotson. That was so brutal, it required medical attention and shut down production for the day. The confrontation began when auctioneer Dan Dotson apparently missed a bid from cast member Mary Padian during the filming of a storage auction. According to witnesses on set, producers asked Dave Hester to bring this oversight to Dan's attention so they could correct the mistake and continue filming. However, when Hester approached Dan about the missed bid, the auctioneer initially ignored him completely, which only frustrated the already volatile situation. Following instructions from producers to persist in getting Dan's attention, Hester approached the auctioneer a second time. This is when the situation spiraled completely out of control, with Dan Dotson reportedly screaming at Hester and saying, quote, "F word you, David, I'm going to kill you." The heated exchange quickly turned physical when Hester punched Dan in the face, prompting Dan to retaliate by raking his fingers across Hester's eye. The brawl became even more chaotic when Dan's wife Laura jumped onto Dave Hester's back in an attempt to defend her husband. In the ensuing struggle, Hester threw Laura through the air, sending her crashing to the ground where she landed hard and became absolutely furious about being knocked down. Cell phone video captured by bystanders shows Laura screaming profanities at Hester, yelling, quote, "You're a son of a bitch. You like hitting a woman? You like knocking me down on the ground?" The violence finally ended when security guards managed to separate everyone involved, but not before Laura had scratched Hester's face deeply enough to draw blood. Hester was immediately kicked off the set and had to drive himself to a local hospital emergency room where he received a tetanus shot to prevent infection from Laura's scratches. AE producers decided to halt filming entirely rather than try to continue the auction without resolving the incident. Fact 8. Barry Weiss made his fortune selling vegetables. While Storage Wars fans knew Barry Weiss as the Collector, a wealthy eccentric who could afford to keep interesting items instead of selling them for profit, most viewers had no idea that his impressive fortune actually came from a surprisingly mundane source that had nothing to do with antiques or collectibles. Barry made his millions in the wholesale produce business, spending 25 years building an empire that distributed fruits and vegetables throughout California before he ever set foot in a storage auction. Barry's path to wealth began when he joined the family business called Northern Produce, which was originally started by his grandfather and later expanded with his brother Joey. The company specialized in importing and distributing fresh fruits and vegetables to retailers across the state, and Barry proved to have a natural talent for the wholesale food industry. He worked tirelessly for more than 2 decades to grow the business into a highly successful operation that generated enough profit to make him financially independent for life. The produce business was so lucrative that Barry was able to retire early and pursue his lifelong passion for collecting antiques and unusual items without worrying about making money from his finds. This financial freedom is what allowed him to approach storage auctions with such a relaxed attitude, compared to other cast members who depended on their discoveries to pay their bills and support their families. Barry was surprisingly secretive about the source of his wealth during his time on Storage Wars, rarely discussing his business background in interviews or on camera. When pressed about how he had accumulated enough money to afford his extensive collection of vintage cars and expensive lifestyle, Barry would often deflect the question or give vague answers about being in the import-export business with his brother. In radio interviews, Barry would occasionally mention that he had been involved with fruits and vegetables, saying, quote, "I was in the import-export business with fruits and vegetables with my brother. It was a family company started by my grandfather." However, he seemed almost embarrassed to admit that such ordinary work had funded his extraordinary lifestyle, preferring to maintain an air of mystery about his past, rather than reveal that his fortune came from something as simple as selling produce to grocery stores and restaurants. Fact 9. Producers stage fake auctions with no real bidding. One of the most damning revelations to come out of Dave Hester's explosive lawsuit against Storage Wars was the claim that producers regularly filmed completely fake auction scenes where no actual bidding was taking place. Yet cast members were instructed to act as if they were participating in real storage unit auctions. This practice completely undermined the show's central premise and revealed just how far producers were willing to go to manufacture the drama and excitement that viewers expected from each episode. According to the legal documents filed in Hester's case, the deceptive filming process worked by having cameras capture footage of cast members and members of the public appearing to bid on storage units, even when there was no legitimate auction happening at that location. The lawsuit specifically stated that defendants would, quote, film footage of the cast members and the public bidding when no actual auction is taking place, in order to make it appear that any of the cast members is bidding at any given auction, whether or not he or she is actually bidding on the unit. This fake bidding footage could then be edited together with real auction scenes to create the illusion that certain cast members were competing for specific storage units, even if they had never actually placed bids on those particular lockers. The practice allowed producers to craft storylines and dramatic moments that never actually occurred during legitimate storage auctions, giving them complete control over which cast members appeared to win which units and how competitive each bidding war seemed to viewers. The staging of fake auctions also helped explain some of the more convenient coincidences that eagle-eyed fans had noticed over the years, such as how certain cast members always seemed to end up with the most interesting storage units, or how dramatic bidding wars would develop at just the right moments for television. By filming multiple versions of auction scenes with different outcomes, producers could choose which version best served the narrative they wanted to tell in each episode, regardless of what had actually happened during the real storage facility visits. Fact 10. A. E. Allegedly paid for plastic surgery. Among the most bizarre and personal allegations contained in Dave Hester's comprehensive lawsuit against Storage Wars was his claim that AE Television Network had actually paid for cosmetic surgery for one of the show's female cast members in order to enhance the program's sex appeal and attract more viewers. While Hester's legal documents did not specifically name which cast member had received the network-funded procedure, the timing and circumstances led many observers to suspect he was referring to Brandy Passante, who was one of only a few women featured prominently on the show during its early seasons. The lawsuit alleged that the network's decision to fund plastic surgery represented just another example of how extensively Storage Wars manipulated reality to create more compelling television. According to the legal filing, quote, nearly every aspect of the series is faked, even down to the plastic surgery that one of the female cast members underwent in order to create more sex appeal for the show. This accusation suggested that E was willing to go far beyond simply staging storage unit contents and was actually investing in physically altering cast members to make them more attractive to audiences. The plastic surgery allegations gained additional credibility when fans began comparing photographs of Brandy Passante from the show's earliest episodes with images from later seasons, noting what appeared to be noticeable changes in her appearance that were consistent with breast enhancement surgery. These before and after comparisons circulated widely on social media and fan websites, with viewers debating whether the changes were due to natural factors or surgical intervention. What made Hester's accusation particularly damaging was the implication that the network viewed Storage Wars cast members not just as reality television personalities, but as products that could be physically modified to increase ratings and commercial appeal. The idea that a major cable network would pay for cosmetic procedures to make a reality show more sexually appealing seemed to cross a line that even skeptical viewers found shocking, especially for a program that was supposed to be about the straightforward business of buying and selling abandoned storage unit contents. Fact 11. Producers used their own locks on units. By the time Storage Wars reached its third season, the show's producers had become so committed to controlling every aspect of the supposed reality that they were literally replacing the authentic locks on storage units with their own hardware to ensure complete control over the staging process. This shocking revelation came to light through Dave Hester's lawsuit, which detailed how production staff would go to storage facilities ahead of filming and swap out the legitimate locks that had been placed by storage facility managers with locks that the show's producers had brought with them. The purpose of this elaborate lock-switching scheme was to guarantee that producers could access any storage unit they wanted to manipulate without having to coordinate with storage facility staff or worry about other people having keys to the units. By installing their own locks, the production team could enter units at any time to plant valuable items, rearrange contents for better camera angles, or stage entire storage lockers from scratch, without anyone else being able to interfere with their preparations. This practice represented a significant escalation in the show's deceptive methods, because it meant that Storage Wars was no longer just manipulating the contents of legitimately abandoned storage units, but was actually creating completely artificial storage scenarios that had no connection to real people who had failed to pay their storage fees. The replacement locks allowed producers to treat storage facilities like movie sets, where they could craft whatever storylines they wanted without being constrained by the authentic circumstances that were supposed to be the foundation of the show. According to the lawsuit, Dave Hester became suspicious about the authenticity of certain storage units when he noticed that production staff would direct his attention to specific boxes or items during his supposedly spontaneous exploration of units he had purchased. Hester realized that the only way producers could know exactly where to find interesting items was if they had planted those objects themselves, which would have required them to have complete access to the storage units before filming began. The lock replacement scheme also required the cooperation of storage facility owners and managers, suggesting that the deception involved multiple parties working together to create fake television content while presenting it to audiences as genuine reality programming. Fact 12. Elvis newspapers were planted by production. One of Storage Wars' most memorable and talked about discoveries turned out to be a complete fabrication orchestrated by the show's producers to create exactly the kind of dramatic moment that would have viewers talking for years to come. When Dave Hester opened a storage unit and discovered a collection of vintage newspapers announcing the death of Elvis Presley, it seemed like the perfect example of the kind of valuable pop culture memorabilia that made storage auctions so exciting. But according to Hester's own lawsuit, those newspapers were deliberately planted by the production team. The Elvis newspaper discovery was particularly effective television because it combined historical significance with the potential for serious monetary value, giving viewers both an emotional connection to a major cultural moment and the thrill of watching someone potentially strike it rich. The find appeared to validate the show's central premise that abandoned storage units could contain unexpected treasures that connected to important moments in American history. However, Dave Hester's legal filing specifically mentioned this discovery as one of the clearest examples of how Storage Wars producers would, quote, regularly plant valuable items or memorabilia in storage units to guarantee dramatic moments for the cameras. According to the lawsuit, the show obtained these planted items through their relationship with a company called Off the Wall Antiques, which regularly appeared on Storage Wars to provide expert appraisals of items that cast members discovered in their units. The partnership with Off the Wall Antiques created a convenient system where the antique company could supply historically significant items like the Elvis newspapers. Producers could plant them in storage units before filming, and then the same company could appear on camera to authenticate and appraise the items as if they were genuine discoveries. This circular arrangement allowed the show to create compelling storylines while maintaining the appearance of legitimacy through expert validation. The revelation that such an iconic Storage Wars moment was completely staged helped explain why the show seemed to have an unusually high rate of historically significant discoveries compared to what most people would expect to find in genuinely abandoned storage units, where the contents are typically mundane household items and personal belongings rather than valuable collectibles. Fact 13. Barry Weiss has a medical marijuana card. While Storage Wars fans always wondered how Barry Weiss managed to stay so relaxed and cheerful during the high-stress competition of storage auctions, the answer may have been hiding in plain sight all along. During a radio interview with Wisconsin's Big Cheese on 107.9 FM, Barry openly discussed his medical marijuana prescription when asked directly about his notably calm demeanor compared to the other aggressive bidders who often lost their tempers during heated auction battles. When the radio host brought up Barry's medical marijuana card, the eccentric collector responded with his typical casual honesty, saying, quote, "Oh God, honestly, it's been about 8 years ago. I'm one of the first in this state to get it, but you know, I got a bad back, and I've got to tend to it." Barry's matter-of-fact admission explained that he had been one of the early recipients of medical marijuana authorization in California, having obtained his prescription approximately 8 years before the interview took place. Barry's explanation that he needed the medical marijuana to treat his bad back seemed perfectly reasonable, given his age and the physical demands of sorting through storage units filled with heavy furniture, boxes, and other items that required lifting and moving. However, his casual tone and slight chuckle when discussing the prescription suggested that he was well aware that his medical condition might have the added benefit of keeping him remarkably calm during the often chaotic atmosphere of storage. Auctions. This revelation helped explain why Barry consistently appeared to be the most laid-back and stress-free cast member on Storage Wars, rarely getting upset when he lost bidding wars or failed to find valuable items in the units he purchased. While other bidders, like Dave Hester, would become visibly angry and confrontational when things didn't go their way, Barry maintained an almost zen-like attitude that made him a fan favorite, but also sometimes puzzled viewers who wondered how he could remain so calm in such a competitive environment. The medical marijuana prescription also fit perfectly with Barry's overall eccentric personality and his approach to storage auctions as entertainment, rather than a serious business venture that required intense focus and aggressive bidding strategies. Fact 14. Cast members can earn $25.00 per episode. While Storage Wars cast members spent years portraying themselves as scrappy entrepreneurs who depended on their storage unit discoveries to make ends meet, the reality behind the scenes was that many of them were earning substantial salaries from A.E. that dwarfed whatever profits they might have made from selling items found in abandoned lockers. According to industry sources and information revealed during various legal proceedings, the top-tier cast members were reportedly earning between $15,000 and $25,000 per episode during the show's most successful seasons. When Storage Wars first premiered in 2010, the cast members were allegedly making around $2,000 per episode, which was a modest but reasonable payment for appearing on an unproven reality television series. However, as the show became one of A.E.'s biggest hits and began attracting millions of viewers each week, the network significantly increased the compensation packages for their most popular personalities to keep them from jumping to competing shows or demanding renegotiated contracts. The higher-end salary range of $25,000 per episode meant that established cast members like Dave Hester, Barry Weiss, Jarrod Schulz, and the auctioneer team of Dan and Laura Dotson could potentially earn well over $300,000 per season if the show produced a typical 13 to 15 episode run. This level of income made their participation in Storage Wars far more lucrative than any realistic profits they could expect to generate from buying and reselling storage unit contents. The substantial television salaries also helped explain why some cast members could afford to keep interesting items for their personal collections rather than selling everything for maximum profit, since their primary income was coming from A.E. rather than from their storage auction activities. This financial reality contradicted the show's narrative that cast members were taking serious financial risks when they bid on storage units, since even if they lost money on their purchases, they were still earning thousands of dollars just for appearing on camera. The salary information became public knowledge partly through Dave Hester's lawsuit, which exposed many behind-the-scenes financial details that the network and cast members had previously kept confidential from viewers who believed they were watching genuine struggling entrepreneurs. Fact 15. Storage Wars Miami was canceled after a cast member's son committed murder. The Storage Wars franchise experienced its darkest moment in 2015 when the Miami spin-off was abruptly canceled, following a shocking tragedy that occurred during what should have been a celebratory family gathering. Cast member Kevin Pugh was hosting a viewing party at his home to watch an episode of Storage Wars Miami with family and friends when his 23-year-old son suddenly produced a firearm and committed homicide right in. in front of everyone who had gathered to enjoy the television show. The horrific incident transformed what was supposed to be a fun family event into a nightmare that required Kevin Pugh to take immediate action to prevent further violence. According to reports of the incident, Kevin physically tackled his own son and wrestled the weapon out of his hands before restraining him until police officers could arrive at the scene to take control of the situation and arrest the young man for the crime he had just committed. Storage Wars. Miami had been one of several spin-off series that AE had launched to capitalize on the success of the original California-based Storage Wars, featuring local storage auction buyers competing for abandoned units in the Miami area. The show followed the same basic format as its parent series, with colorful personalities bidding on storage lockers and then discovering what treasures or junk they had purchased, but it was set against the backdrop of South Florida's unique culture and demographics. The timing of the murder could not have been worse for the show's future prospects, as the violent crime occurred while the family was literally watching Storage Wars Miami on television, creating an inescapable connection between the tragedy and the program itself. The incident made it impossible for AE to continue promoting or producing the series without constantly being reminded of the horrible events that had taken place during what should have been a routine promotional activity. Following the murder, AE made the decision to cancel Storage Wars Miami permanently rather than attempt to continue the series without Kevin Pugh, or try to distance the show from the tragic circumstances that had befallen one of its cast members and his family. During such a traumatic situation,